Nick C. On November 2nd, 2021, hundreds of QAnon supporters of one particularly fringy variety gathered in Dallas at the location where President Kennedy was fatally shot to see his son, JFK Jr., who in real world has been dead since 1999, reveal himself as alive, well, and planning to be the Republican vice presidential candidate for 2024. At 12:30 p.m., the time of President Kennedy's shooting, the crowd began to recite the Pledge of Allegiance. Why? Who knows? When nothing happened, the crowd slowly began to dissipate, with some people saying that JFK Jr. would appear at the Rolling Stones concert later in the day. What do you think the chances are that a few months down the road, we'll hear, quote-unquote, eyewitness claims that JFK Jr. actually appeared to the crowd that day, possibly in spirit, quote-unquote, whatever that means? Any other thoughts or comments? Hey, Nick, thank you for asking me about this. I kind of started giving a long, involved, kind of philosophical answer to this about, belief and the nature of belief and stuff. But I think that's just going to put everybody to sleep. I think what I want to say about this is that, I think it's a real shame that we have the phenomena occur where people are so grossly lied to for so long and believe it so hard that they fall into believing absurdities like that. Because, of course, as Voltaire said, once you have people believing absurdities like that, atrocities, are right around the corner, or certainly the potential for them are right there. And that's why I have concern about these things and why I talk about them. When people heard me talking about Trump in 2015, 2016, when he first announced, I got a lot of shit from a lot of people telling me how wrong I was and how off the rails I was and how delusional I was and how much of a cult member I still was for daring to criticize the great Donald Trump. And I look now, 5-6 years down the road from what he has inspired and what he did, what he inspired others to do, and how QAnon has developed. And of course, I've talked at great length on this channel about QAnon, and it is a very dangerous, near radicalized group of people. And it's just one of many such groups that Trump has inspired. January 6th was the epitome of that. And if you think January 6th was, a walk in the park, a tourist exhibit, a bunch of people, going and touring the Capitol, you have no idea what you're talking about, right? You just buying into a bunch of propaganda and nonsense. The pictures, videos, and data coming out of January 6th were, it was an insurrection. It was an attempt to overthrow the United States government right in Washington, D.C., inspired by and all but ordered by Donald Trump. That happened. I said that kind of thing was going to happen, and I got called names for it. I got insulted for it, right? So I have a pretty big chip on my shoulder about that whole thing. And I keep talking about it because I keep thinking, well, I'm just going to keep putting it out there and keep messaging it, and eventually people will catch on, that because I my own morality won't allow me to be silent about it. And so, so here we are. So we end up with this rally, on November 2nd down in Texas, one of the single stupidest low IQ events that could possibly ever happen. And you go, how is this possible? Well, as I like to say about cults all the time, stupidity ain't part of the picture. Intelligence ain't got nothing to do with it. And I've railed against the stupidity as much as anybody else. But at the end of the day, that's not the thing that's going on. It's about the power of belief. It's about the power, the emotional investment of it. And the other thing I wanted to say about this, and something that I don't think very many people actually get on board with, but I want to keep putting it out there anyway, because I think this is important too, is you have to understand that people buy into these conspiracy theories or these crazy ideas like Scientology, like QAnon, because their own lives are not satisfactory in some significant way. They are really traumatized. They are really stressed. They are undergoing some incredibly important or significant change in their life, a negative one usually. or certainly an unsettling one. This is why college kids get recruited, moving into a new town, going to a new university, they get recruited into cults all the time. It's easy. It's like shooting ducks, they just boom, boom, boom. Because they're uncertain, they don't know what they're doing, they're unexperienced, they lack critical thinking skills, and the cults, they're just easy prey for cults and for controlling narcissist type figures. So we see this kind of thing, and we've talked about this. We talked about the fact that big change, traumatic change, unresolved trauma in a person's life, unresolved problems or issues, and this includes economic problems and concerns, value problems, moral quandaries and problems. I mean, all of these things are really important to us as human beings. And so when people are going through these traumatic times or experiencing what they think of as traumatic times, they look to these weird solutions, these weird alternate realities to try to, in a way, put themselves into the twilight zone. If living in Scientology or living in QAnon is like living in the twilight zone, for some people, the twilight zone is a better alternative than reality. And that's why they go there. That's why the emotional satisfaction of being in that space, being in that culture, enmeshing them, putting themselves into that world. That's why they do it. Again, it has to do with those emotional needs. And when your life sucks, when you ain't got no money, when your values aren't being agreed upon, when you think that the values you were raised with are being betrayed left, right, and center every time you turn on the TV or the radio or you turn on the news and you're being presented a steady diet of bad news, N theta, as they say in Scientology, right? Just bad news after bad news after bad news. And everything you think you grew up with and everything you think you fought for if you were in the military is all just being pissed on, right? If you think that's the world, well, that world sucks. I don't want to live in that world. I want a better world. I want a world where my values are reflected, where my ideas are reflected, where my trauma is cared about and being taken care of, where somebody's listening to me. That's how the Trumps of the world get in there, right? Is because the people who are supposed to be doing the work, supposed to be doing their jobs, don't. And we've had many years of people being taken advantage of. And I'm talking about ideology now. I'm talking about, American politics. I'm talking about the American economy. I'm talking about from the point of view of Americans, lots of different Americans. There's lots of different points of view. But from these point of view of the QAnon people, the Trump supporting people, right? They are coming at this from a lot of different perspectives, and personal betrayal and trauma is one of them. And I'm just trying to point that out. You can talk to me, and I've definitely talked about the racism and the misogyny and the neo-Nazis and the crazy nonsense that is part of that. But it's not all of it. Those words don't encapsulate all of what's going on with QAnon or with Trump supporters. Not by a long shot, right? It's not all just racism or misogyny or neo-Nazis. There's a lot more to it. And at the bottom of it is that basic sense that society and reality itself has kind of betrayed these folks, and they need to find a reality that they can follow, that gives them some hope, gives them some desire to keep going and have something to look forward to even. I mean, it's weird, but if you can kind of get where I'm coming from, I'm just trying to explain what's going on in their heads, a little bit more, without calling them names or too many names. Anyway, this isn't, I'm just trying to say that there's more going on here than they're just a bunch of stupid idiots. You asked me for my comments on that. That's what came to mind. I hope that's not like too weird or too highbrow or something. It's just an approach, a way of thinking about these people that is not just outright insulting, because that's kind of what's going on there as far as I can tell, deep, deep, deep down inside. And I thought maybe sharing that might be useful to some folks. So there you go.